as a guest.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
And it's just to hit the more actions and start recording.
Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you. So this meeting will be recorded, so we have access to it on another phone as well. And all your officers who couldn't make it today can be up to date. So welcome to the Child Protection, Safeguarding, and Concussion Safety for All webinar. Will be about an hour, 45 minutes, and we'll leave some time for questions at the end. This presentation is available in French for our French-speaking clubs as well. So first things first, to use Microsoft Teams, I know a lot of us are used to being virtual now, but just in case we're not sure. We've got our show participants, our open chat. Feel free to pop a message into the chat box with questions, and we'll address them at the end. You can raise or lower your hand. We should get a notification for that. More options if you want to switch your camera on or off, or your microphone on and off. So we're going to ask that you keep that microphone off so that we don't get feedback, so everyone can hear really clearly. And just for our friends who are French speaking, I'm going to start by acknowledging that the land on which I'm presenting is traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. So I'm speaking to you from Ottawa. Our agenda today, we are going to be focusing on the Code of Behavior for Underage and our new Canadian adaptation, the role of the protection officer or the safeguarding officer if you're a senior-only club, safeguarding training protocols and police checks, particularly for our guests from Ireland as well. We'll address that. Our concussion protocols, our codes of conduct, and some information about upcoming concussion training. So this presentation is going to be in English, but there are lots of resources that are available in French if we would like them.
Lisa?
Oh, you can't see the slides. I've just
can't see the slides, yeah.
All right.
There's a couple comments as well saying that.
Oh, okay. I can't see the comments. Share content, share slides.
They are visible now.
They are. Just the slides? And if I present in this full screen, does that still share?
It's when you go to the full screen that it can't be seen.
Oh, okay. But you can see it if I just do this?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. So here's our agenda, code of behaviors, roles, etc. So our goals today are to gain an understanding of the importance of a child protection officer or a safeguarding officer, to gain valuable resources relating to protection of children and vulnerable adults, to gain an understanding of what a concussion is and the importance of training, and to gain valuable resources relating to the concussion protocols and training. So the role of the child protection officer or the safeguarding officer, if your club has anyone under the age of 18, which it would include a university student or a CEGEP or a college student or a recent graduate of high school who is considered a little bit more like an adult but is still underage, you would have your child protection officer, or if you have vulnerable adults. If you are a senior-only club, you would have your safeguarding officer, which has a lot of the very same roles, but is less child-focused. So even if you're a senior-only club, why would it matter? You might have vulnerable adults, you might have college, university, CEGEP students, or workers who are underage. And of course, as we aim to develop our teams and our clubs and to grow the sports, and we can speak with Ronan about this for our development programs, you would be looking toward having a succession plan, including a youth team. That's a really great way to have members who are familiar with the games, who have competed before, and who've played together. Really builds a strong team. And we've seen that in some of our programs with who've had youth and who've gone on to become adults. So I know St. Mike's, Ottawa, both have had really big success with players coming, and Brampton, or Roger Casements, I guess, now with the Brampton Rebels, who are now playing as Roger Casements adults. We've had a lot of chieftains go on to play for St. Mike's, St. Vincent's, St. Pat's. Durham, in Toronto, Ottawa Gales have had our team. Air is starting to see the benefits as well. Montreal will be seeing those benefits soon, where these players have come along up through the youth program and into an adult program. And so to have a really strong succession plan, you would be aiming to have a youth team eventually. And in Ontario, for our clubs who are in Ontario or who intend to play in Ontario, which is where the nationals will be held, concussion protocols are up to the age of 26. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's where it's important to have officers who are aware of these protocols and can implement them. So our first introduction is the GAA Code of Behavior for Underage. At the moment, it's only available in English. And I believe for the GAA, it will always be available only in English. But the Canadian adaptation will be coming out alongside the new update in March. So this is considered to be like the Bible of supporting underage and vulnerable members within the GAA. And that's their words. So it has been published. It's been what we've been following the last number of years, but we felt it was time to include a lot of updates that are really only more relevant to Canada, especially as we aim to become a bigger sport in Canada, and to gain all the benefits of being part of certain memberships. So they will be producing a more virtual friendly and updated version at the end of March, and ours will be updated and presented to coincide with that release. So we're really looking forward to that. At the moment, our adaptation in Canada is also only available in English, but we do have plans to put it into French as well. So we're really looking forward to that. It includes 11 sections, which cover the topics of our coaches. It covers the topics of our referees, traveling with children, coaching, our ratios, etc. So making sure that all underage players, whether they're playing for a minor team or a junior team or a youth team, and even into a senior team, that these participants are protected. And that coaches, referees, volunteers, mentors, trainers, that they are protected as well. So we often talk about the protection in the viewpoint of the child, but these codes, these policies, all of these documents are also to protect the coaches and trainers as well. So from any sort of allegations, if your club and your volunteers are following each of these policies to the letter, to the code, then they are protected, provided that they are following them. And that helps you with your insurance. And I'm sure Sean will speak of the insurance at a later time as well, with the updated section for abuse and protection for clubs. It's really important that these policies are followed so that your club can be insured for these types of allegations as well. So these are really important, and we're really excited to unveil the Canadian adaptation with all of the really excellent resources that we have in our vast and wonderful country. And of course, if you have questions about this or want a preview, I can definitely reach out and I can definitely share what's coming in them. So we're talking Club Child Protection Officer, who would be supporting your volunteers, providing these documents to your volunteers. This is a mandatory position per the GAA Club Manual. So it is an obligatory person that you have a child protection officer. It can also be called a children's officer. And in the event that you don't have and have no intention of ever having any youth participate, you would call it your safeguarding officer. And your safeguarding officer would be implementing the regulations that relate to the club only. And so if you haven't, if you or your club has not selected a children's officer or safeguarding officer, please do so by the 15th of March and submit your name to Angela O'Murray at the secretary email before you begin any club activities. And this will ensure that you are following protocols and policies. So the objective of the children's officer is a person who is able to look at the documents, look at the policies, look at all of the protocols that are in place, and look at the club's practices and be able to address whether or not the policies, the practices, the intentions, the plans, whether they reflect the best interests of young people, whether they're protected, if it impacts the children. So for example, if you're planning a tournament and having a tournament for children, your schedules should reflect an age-appropriate amount of time for a game for children, the correct size of fields, the correct size of goalposts, ensuring that your volunteers are properly vetted, making sure that travel plans are safe, etc. So all of those decisions that are made on a club level, looking critically and making sure are the young people and the vulnerable being included, and is it going to impact their welfare? How is it going to impact their welfare? And how do we take steps to ensure that these people are safe? So clubs don't legally have the right to know whether an adult is considered a vulnerable adult, although it can be disclosed, it doesn't have to be. So it's important for coaches to be aware that that is a possibility, that within your sporting community that a vulnerable adult might be present at your games, and you might not know. It might not be a visible disability, and so it's important for your coaches and trainers and mentors and your referees to be aware that these types of members are possible in your organization, and that their best interests should be included in decisions. So your club children's officer, safeguarding officer should ensure that the best codes of best practice for youth sport and code of behavior, and in the case of seniors only, the adult code of behavior, ensure that those are being adhered to, that your spectators are also respectful of the code of behavior as well. Your child protection officer, children's officer, or safeguarding officer should assist with organizing or facilitating the delivery of child protection awareness program within the club and other appropriate training with your club's designated person. So larger clubs, particularly with a youth present, would have a club designated person, and that's the person to whom any matters of accusation of abuse would be delivered to this person, and they would prepare a subcommittee or have a hearings committee or view the case and make decisions. In the event that a club doesn't have a designated person, the default is your club chairperson. So your club chairperson should be aware that they also have this responsibility of being the club's designated person, where the child protection officer or coach or mentor or parent would bring forth an allegation of abuse, and the club designation person would follow the appropriate protocols. And so your officer should also distribute the copies of the code of behavior and your codes of conduct at club level, and ensure that everyone who's relevant, so your mentors, your coaches, your your players, your parents in particular, would sign and abide by the code. And of course, to influence the policy and practice, to prioritize the children and young people's needs. So this goes back to making sure everyone is safe, but also encouraging your club to think ahead in terms of development and preparing a youth team, growing a youth team in anticipation of eventually having a very strong senior team and perhaps a junior team as well. So your children's officer is not responsible to report the allegations of abuse. This is for your designated person. So we want to make sure that it's clear that your children's officer can be the designated person and can deal with allegations of abuse. But if that's not very specifically clarified, that responsibility is to the chairperson. And reporting could be to the police, it could be to Child Protection Services, or it can be dealt internally or with the county. So as of 2021, and this in Ireland it was before, but there were not any means at that time to do so virtually. So now we have the available tools. As of this year, children's officers, safeguarding officers, and all coaches, trainers, and mentors will be required to complete the following training. So regardless of whether your coach is coaching a senior team or they're coaching a team with youth, they will need to take this training. The Commit to Kids training is about 2 hours, 18 minutes. If you're watching through all the videos, I found it was about an hour and a half reading through the documents instead. It's a $12 investment, and you can encourage your club to reimburse the cost to their coaches. It's $12. And they do have group rates available. So if you want to get together with your division, if you want to get together, we can do a whole group course as a county. This can be organized at a reduced cost. But that will be mandatory, and that ties back into our insurance policies for dealing with allegations of abuse. So that's important. It is one of the conditions of insurance as well. So we have to make sure that all our trainers are qualified per the rule, and this is the rule. So you will receive a certificate of completion, and you submit that to your club's children's officer, and then you can begin coaching or training or mentoring or volunteering and sporting. The safeguarding refresher course is offered by the GAA, and it's online, and it is, I believe it's under an hour, but I'm not too sure. I can't remember, but this is required by the GAA, where the rule is every coach takes a child protection training, which would be, it could be for Sport Ireland, it could be the GAA, it could be for whatever country they're in for any of the world GAA organizations. And then in addition to safeguarding refresher course, which is GAA specific. So they allow the overseas units to do one that is relevant to their country and then just the refresher course, instead of just the GAA regular course and then the refresher course. And this must be completed every 2 years. So it's not an annual thing, it's every other year. And it has no cost. And unfortunately, it is only available in English, or rather it's not available in French, and it probably won't be. So for our French-speaking coaches and trainers, that is something that we might have to support you in if the language is a challenge. But it is free. The Commit to Kids is available in French as well, because it is a Canadian organization that puts it on. And so that is a step before coaching, as well as police checks. So there's a lot of question about, is it just for kids? Code clubs with children, is it just for, or is it for every club? And I'm going to dispel any of those questions or address those questions. It is for every single coach, whether you're coaching an under-6 team, whether you're coaching an old boys team or like in rugby or an old boys and girls team, I guess. Any senior team, any junior team, any minor team, any youth team at any age, every single coach must have a vulnerable sector police check. For those of you in Toronto, we have applied to be a recognized organization. So at this point, we will be updating you for that. The other clubs in Ontario, there has been no change to our process. Just that the Toronto proper has a little bit of an adjustment we're making. Otherwise, your OPP or other municipal or provincial police checks are appropriate. An RCMP police check is also appropriate. And these are valid for 3 years, except for the coaches who are attending the CYC, because the tournament rule is every 2 years. So this police check is not only to protect the participants, and it does give participants a peace of mind, but it does offer some protection as well for yourself, where you don't have a history. You've clearly been vetted. The club has done its due diligence to ensure that its clubs are not, or its coaches are not registered offenders. So it offers protection to clubs as well, particularly in view of insurance. We have had instances where we have coaches who come from abroad, particularly in Ireland. And so we get that question, especially around when we were doing the St. Mary's program, and a coach couldn't come or hadn't been in Canada long enough to receive a police check and isn't a resident. So in those instances, they would submit the police check from their own country or the previous country where they were residing, and they must be supervised by a volunteer who has submitted a valid police check. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean a coach. If your coach is going into schools, your principal or teacher would have the valid police check, and they would need to be informed that they are required to stay for supervision because we don't have a Canadian police check. Or it could be, for example, your club secretary might be attending the training and isn't coaching, but has their police check and can supervise as well. And when the GAA comes out with the new ratios and the CGAA to follow, you'll see that it is not recommended that you are supervising a youth group in particular, a children's team on your own, just to protect yourselves. If a volunteer cannot present a valid negative check, for example, 25 years ago, a coach had a DUI, for example, they can't get a fully negative police check. The club can do a risk assessment, and that's on our website. It's also on the GAA website. And it will be, a little template will be in the code of conduct as well. There's one in the old one currently, and it'll be brought into the new one and digitized, which is exciting. You can complete the risk assessment where your chairperson, your child protection officer, your secretary, or your subcommittee can go through and say, is this offense, does it pose a risk to our vulnerable population, and how can we prevent any possible incidents? And there's a whole process, and it's really great as well. So we can do a whole workshop on risk assessment in the future if that's something that clubs are interested in as well. And just a little update or a reminder, your club and county children's officers are the only members who are permitted to view the police checks for privacy. So if another member or another officer, a parent, any volunteer, any player has a question about the risk associated with the volunteer, they can bring it up with the children's officer or the designated person, but they can't actually physically see the police check. So it's really important, children's officers and safeguarding officers, you have to keep those in a very private place, in a folder that can't be accessed. And when we bring in our document management system, and we talk about that later on in the year, there should be a special password for child protection officers who can see those. But please, yes, please remember, nobody except the children's officer may view that, unless there's, of course, express permission given by the volunteer. So the volunteer at any time can say, hey, can you show my police check to parent Y? And they can do that. That's no problem. So we can take a moment if you need to stretch for a second, or get some water, or we can keep going to part 2, which is the concussion protocols. I'll just see what the chat box. Oh, so do we need the originals, or are photocopies of a police check okay? The original is ideal because you can see the seal, but you don't have to keep the original. You can keep a copy of it. Your police check should also be specifically for either the Canadian GAA or your club, or the CYC. But if it's just for the CYC, you can put it under your club as well. And that shows proof that your club has done its due diligence in sending this. So you can't accept, and thank you for bringing that up. So you can't accept one from the Hockey Association. You can't accept one. You can in the interim until you get your one for your Gaelic sports. But the one you will be receiving and keeping on record is the one specifically obtained for the purposes of volunteering within the CGAA or club organization. So that's really important. As we are in COVID and in recent years, a lot of the police checks have gone digital. So I know in my club, the majority of the ones that I have are digital copies. So that way, I just keep them in a folder, and the volunteer has a copy as well, so that if another organization requests a police check and is not particularly picky about who it's for, they can use that. Good question, thank you. Okay, in view of the time, we're going to scoot into concussion safety and protocols. So of course, this is a huge topic in sports right now, not just in the GAA, the CGAA, but in all sports. And we've seen, particularly in our rugby club, some pretty negative impacts of a concussion, and we want to go out of our way to prevent that. And we need to have policies in place, protocols, pathways in place, so that we know exactly what to do when a player is returning from a concussion. So in Ontario, per Rowan's Law, a pathway must be available for players under the age of 26 by the end of July in 2021. Ours will be available. We've got the GAA one. We've been using it for years. So it will be updated to reflect Rowan's Law in Ontario, but it will be available sooner than that. So British Columbia, Manitoba, Ontario, and Nova Scotia have laws around concussion training, protocols, and pathways for its sporting members. All the other provinces have them as recommendations, and I anticipate as awareness increases, it will become law in more provinces. And so in our new code of behavior underage, there are links available to different laws which you can view, and any relevant provincial guidelines. In Ontario, the vulnerable members are considered to be up to the age of 26 when it comes to head injuries. I fully support this, as that is the year when the brain would typically stop developing physically. And so we need to protect our players. So clubs that have members may not have members who are under the age of 18 or 19. In some of the provinces, I believe Manitoba is 19 as well. You still need your safeguarding officer to be aware that there is a particular pathway that your player and coaches need to take in terms of returning to play for a concussion, even up to the age of 26. Now that impacts a lot more teams. So as of January 2021 in Ontario, and as of March 1st for the rest of the provinces, all coaches, officials, trainers, players, and parents are required to have signed and submit the concussion code of conduct to their club secretary before participating in any sanctioned sporting event. They will be available from club secretaries. Following this presentation, we will send them. And they can be found on the CGA website, or they will be found. They are available in both official languages. And members are required to sign the code annually and must sign one for each category of participation. So for example, I am a coach, a player, and a referee, so I would sign all three of them. You would be signing the ones that are relevant to you. And these are not for players just up to the age of 26, but for all players. So you would attach that onto your waiver so that your participant would be signing the waiver. They would fill in the registration. They would pay their registration fee if your club has fees. And they would sign this code of conduct or these codes of conduct. Now I'm going to attempt, can we see if I switch over to see the code of conduct?
It's coming through fine.
Yeah, okay, awesome. So this is the example for the athletes. And this is not just for Ontario. In order to protect all of our members, we are choosing to mandate the highest level of safety protocols for our players. So this one is for athletes. It would be either for an adult player from the age of 18 or 19, depending on the province, all the way up to until they can't play anymore. Or it's also for underage. So it's all encompassing for all athletes. And it talks about preventing concussions and what I'm going to do to prevent myself from getting a concussion. It is really important that you follow the rules of taking the concussion seriously. A head injury is a head injury. We have the mantra, it comes, Angie Stevenson was particularly known for saying this last year, or in her term as development officer. When in doubt, sit them out. And that's the GAA mantra, that's Ontario mantra, that pretty much every sporting organization, when in doubt, sit them out. If they've been hit on the head, and it looks like it could be a concussion and you might not be sure. So if the ball kind of lobs over and bonks them on the head, it's not likely. You would want to check them, but a smaller impact in a very large space, very gently, is unlikely, but not impossible. But this would say that if it's something that we're not sure, we sit them out. Any of these instances, we sit them out. And it's important to create an environment where participants feel safe and comfortable speaking up. So our athletes are saying in this code of conduct, I will not make fun of a teammate. I will encourage them to sit out. I will not discourage them from telling my coach. Or I know that my friend has a concussion, I will tell. Because, and we've seen it with, unfortunately, Rowan Stinger in Ontario, a member of my local Barrhaven rugby club. She had her friends hide the fact that she got a concussion. She did not share with her club coach that she got one in a high school practice. And she did end up passing away from her injuries. And so we are looking to prevent that. So we want to encourage our teammates to be safe. I'll support all participants. I'll commit to the return to sport, and I will help prevent. So this is players saying, I will follow the rules and not intentionally play unsafely, and I will also take the steps that I need to prevent accidents from happening as well, as best as possible. So it's really important for these athletes and parents to sign this. The code of conduct for coaches and team trainers is similar, and so is the one for officials. And they are all very similar, saying that they will do their best to prevent concussions and support the return to play guidelines. And so those are also available in French for our French-speaking clubs. And it's important that everyone signs before participating in any sporting event. And an official, I've had this question, the official is predominantly for referees, but if you have dedicated umpires, linespeople, etc., or for example, I know in some super leagues, they have like a dedicated timekeeper who's watching the time or counting scores. Those are people who can participate in the return or into the code of conduct as well. But your primary official would be your coach or your referee. But your other officials should be aware. So again, all coaches, officials, participants / parents. And so you would send that back to your secretary. Your child protection officer does not necessarily need to see them, but they should be aware that which coaches have signed these codes of conduct, so that those coaches can go into active coaching responsibilities. So there are 2 concussion trainings available at this time. The Ottawa Sport Concussion Training, and these are actual links, the orange parts, so you can actually go ahead and view them right away. And those will be mandatory. So it's mandatory your coach takes a training, and these are 2 that we recommend. And we will develop our own with regards to the CGA and Gaelic sports in particular. But these 2 are extremely comprehensive. The parachute has a number of excellent additional safety trainings as well. So you can do one or the other or both. Submit that to your secretary or your child protection officer or your safeguarding officer. And then you can start your coaching or your training or your officiating. So those are required as well. And we'll give you some time to look into that, and we can give you some guidance. There are also the GAA concussion pathways and return to play guidance. It's on the GAA website, and it is in the process of being uploaded to the CGAA website as well. Those return to play protocols are excellent, and they are pretty comprehensive. We will be, again, by the end of July, it's mandatory in Ontario, and we will be unveiling the CGAA concussion pathways, which won't look too different from the GAA pathways, but they will be province specific. So hopefully you're able to view those. If you need those links, I can send them to you as well. The Ottawa Sport Concussion Training is not available in French at this time, but I believe that they are in the works of preparing a French equivalent. So just to recap, before we get into our questions, thank you very much, first of all, for being here and taking an hour out of your beautiful, well, it's beautiful Saturday here. Not sure how beautiful it is where you are, but Saturdays are great. You can definitely visit Gaelic Games Canada for resources, and it's pretty dynamic website, so we'll be uploading and sharing information to our secretaries, who will pass it on to its members. We are getting ready for our new Code of Behavior for Canada in March, and the digital version in the GAA, so you can actually look in and compare if you'd like to spend the time on that. They are identical, the codes of behavior. We have just included areas which are Canada specific, and we've eliminated ones that are not relevant. You can always email childprotection.ca@gaa.ie for me with questions, feedback, anything. I am available. Even if it's just what you consider a small question is probably very important. Please remember to submit your selection of your child protection officer or safeguarding officer, club safeguarding officer, by March 15th. That's to secretary.ca@gaa.ie, and get your coaches and officers training. And I would encourage to, especially for our youth clubs, but have your players and parents sit down on the concussion training as well, and to participate in that, because I think they'll find it to be extremely valuable. I know that when we did it for my club, it was incredibly valuable. And even with all of the research and training that I've done as a phys ed teacher, I even learned a little bit more. So it's really good. It's really valuable. It doesn't take up too much of your time, but it can save a life. It can save many lives. So I hope that you learned something valuable today as well. And I'm going to try to get back to Teams now. How do I do that? Excellent. So I'm going to open it up now for questions. I'm seeing now in the chat from the Ottawa Guild, does a parent sign under the form for their dependent when they're 18 and under? And from 19 to 26, the player signs. So in Ontario, from 17 and under, the parent will sign, and from 18 plus, the player themselves sign. And that's for everyone. So it's not just up until 26. Concussions can affect everyone, but the pathways is what the age 26 becomes relevant to. So the response and the return to play is where age 26 comes into play. But every player needs to sign the concussion protocol. So thank you for that question. I see the chairperson of Toronto has a question. Is that?
Yeah, that's Peter. Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
Just a question, two-part question for you regarding the training and the VSSs for coaches. Number one, is it possible to get a document sent out to all the clubs listing what each coach needs, whether it's for adults or for underage or stuff like that? And secondly, is there a plan to enforce it, or is it just putting the onus back on the clubs that this is what you need to do, make sure your clubs get it?
Great questions. We can definitely send a document for coaches. It will be outlined in the code of conduct, but we can take sort of a snapshot of it and send it out as its own separate document. And we can do that as soon as this weekend. In terms of enforcement, it comes down to insurance. So we can't force you to get these police checks, but it is the rule, and the insurance coverage is, it looks first and foremost at, is the rule being followed and enforced? And if not, then there's no insurance. So it's important to protect your club and to protect your players in the event of an accusation. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, they were brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Is that Paula? Secretary of Air Oak, do you have a question?
Yes, Lisa, thank you for the presentation. Just two quick things. Will there be a CGA or PP specific document being sent out as well that can be handed to parents, players, etc.?
Yes. Yeah, we can do.
All right.
We can have that available.
Perfect.
The child protections officer will be distributing the entire code of underage, and what the GAA update is doing is chunking it into little pieces so that we can have just a parent specific one, a coach specific one, a CPO one. So yes, that will be available in March as well.
Okay, because currently we're using the Coaches Association of Canada one, and it's really handy, but it would be nice to have something formal, organizational formal. The second one is something that we've done at our club for the last couple of years, and I don't know if it's just a one step further. Concussion is a huge thing, personally and for our club. So we have made I've asked all our coaches, we've made it mandatory that they take the Making Headway course from the Coaches Association of Canada. It's an excellent tool if anybody wants to have a look at it. It takes you through all of the steps of concussion, but it's a test, an exam if you like, and you get your certificate at the end of it, and it's free of charge. You just register on the website, and it's a really, really good resource.
Oh, thanks, Paula. Yeah, we'll add that. I'll definitely add that to our list of available. It's Making Headway.
Making Headway. It's on the coaches.ca website. And you can just log in. There are sport-specific ones, and then there's the generic one, and it's really good because you can't move to the next module unless you have the answers correct. So it's a learning and exam all in one. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
So we'll have a document available as well with all of the different ways we can get our training. Awesome. Thank you, Paula. Are there any other questions or feedback that we have about child protection, safeguarding, or concussions? No. We will also be doing, or we're aiming to do more officer training series, and so we can really go into a detailed what these pathways look like in terms of developing them as well. So we're aiming for the fall as we're thinking about our new committees, as we're thinking about getting our clubs, making sure that they are running at their best, just running at their best capacity. One of the things that we can do as well is a risk assessment and child protection audit, and we'll be doing a little bit more promotion of that type of training as well later on in the year, where you're going through and looking, is our club inclusive? Is it safe? And does it have all of the necessary aspects as well? Paula, I see your hand up. Is that a new question or just from before?
No, sorry, it's not.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right. Aisling?
Hi, Lisa. I was just wondering if you are going to be running more of these webinars later on, if there's any talk of Canada maybe having a concussion talk, like bringing somebody, like a guest in or something, and then it could be open to everybody within Canada so that their members can join into that.
Yes, that is absolutely something that we will be looking at doing.
Okay, great.
Yes, and we're hoping to get it done in both languages for our French-speaking clubs as well.
Okay, great. Just so it'd be just a way of making it more consistent, that everybody is doing the same thing as well and getting the same training.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Ash.
Okay, thanks.
All right, well, so if anything comes to you, any questions you have, if you want to see any additional information or documentation, again, my email is on the presentation, which will be available following this, this workshop and this presentation. So please feel free to reach out. I would rather more questions than fewer, just so that we're making sure that, again, all of our coaches have their police checks, regardless of whether they're coaching youth or adults, that all of our players, participants, coaches, mentors, and referees are signing those new codes of conduct alongside their waivers and registration. And that we are participating in our child protection and wellness trainings, as well as our concussion trainings. Those are our two big focuses in terms of player welfare, and they will lead into all of our other welfare workshops that are in the works as well. So please reach out if you have questions, and a humongous thank you for being here today and taking the time to make your club better, and for being here and encouraging and supporting the development of child protection, concussion training, and ultimately Gaelic games in Canada. So thank you again for being here. And I'll stay on if you have more questions. And again, all of that information will be distributed as it becomes available. So thank you everybody for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Paula.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks.
Thanks, Lisa. Great presentation. Everything went well. Hopefully things go good in 2 weeks from you. We're really prepared. And if you want to do